See, when it comes to theater, you can go two ways about it. You can either tell a story from the past through a ritual or create theater like a play, which is more seen as being secular. There were different ways of looking at the genre of comedy. Now it could be used through many different ways, but throughout what I have learned, most of what was seen as comedies were based off at others' expense of running into misfortune. The more popular a play got, the more it would be copied over time and it would be shared out through history, and which is what we call middle comedy. We didn't get new comedy until after the death of Alexander the Great. During the time of a play going around in Rome, plays were used in Roman theater to cheer up everybody during a time of tragedy. But the development side of Roman theater actually began with the dancing to flute music, which then followed with interpretations and verses towards the flute music to medleys of dances, then to comedies with a storyline, and the songs would be leading to the flute music as well. And with Italian writers, they actually have their own thing where tragedies would have happy endings, which would change the view of everything as it all doesn't have to be so dramatic. By the time of Commedia dell'arte, women were allowed to be on stage and participate in plays. Now, Roswitha was known for making sacred comedies, and she looked at Terence, who was another playwright, and she had so much admiration for his work. But what was really ironic was that Terence wrote about chastity and Roswitha wrote about virgins, considering they were almost the same. Roswitha's plays were written as closet dramas, in which were only to have been read, because the way she was introduced to Terence's plays were through books mainly. However, not everyone was too fond of comedic plays. Mystery and morality plays were some of the first European plays to have both religious and secular life in the plays. Because Christians did not like the idea of theater and plays, they decided to perform them in church and base them off of the Christian religion storylines, and in which those of the church would participate in it, to make it seem as less sinful. Religious leaders did not even like Moliere's work because they felt as though that it was disrespectful and a way of mocking their beliefs and the church. It would even go as far as the bishops excommunicating anyone who went to go see those plays. Now, with Shakespeare's work with comedy, he had a happy ending and he never made it about any historical figures from the past, which made it more comedic to the audience. The characters that Shakespeare had used were stock characters because they had more depth in their character, in which you could feel as an audience member the real emotions, whether it came down to fear or desires of the characters. His work made it feel relatable towards the crowd. The crowd would share empathy with the characters that are acting in the plays. And an interesting fact is that what they saw as comedy came out to be coming from the expense from another person/character meeting up with the misfortune that they had run into. Most topics of plays were of women choosing who they want to marry, along with women protecting themselves. The idea of the lack of voice that women had around the time was a joke, and it was seen as a comedy. Comedy wasn't just based on the expense of women's misfortune and misguidance. However, it was also based on middle class and lower class people falling in love. Within Moliere's work with comedy, it was more real than anyone else's work. He made sure that the comedies were witty enough to the point where you could imagine yourself as an audience member in the character's shoes, as if they were a mirror image of everyday life. And although the genre of comedy was just as popular as it was for the genre of drama, there were a lot of people who weren't that fond of it. Even the type of comedies that were being written about then would have been a problem if they were used as the same topics as comedies are seen now. And that is the comedic side of theater.